In July 1967, violence erupted in the city of Detroit. For many who lived near the epicenter of 67, the events of that summer were at once traumatic and tragic. Neighborhoods were changed overnight, and some uncomfortable truths about race relations in Detroit became apparent. There have not been many opportunities since that time for neighborhoods affected by those events to come together and think about what happened in 1967 and what it means to reflect, heal, and build a renewed hope for the future. The Hope Village is a neighborhood located just over a mile from the start of the civil disturbances of 1967 near what is now the campus of Focus Hope. This documentary collects reflections about those events from Hope Village residents then and now, with the goal of building understanding and creating a stronger foundation for the pursuit of hope.
I was actually on a field trip maybe 2 years ago. I was teaching at a school in Hamtramck, and at this particular school it was predominantly Arabic. And we took them on this field trip to the Charles H. Wright Museum, and we saw the exhibit about the 67 riots, and I learned so much. I'm like, how did I never learn this before? How have I never learned this before? I've been in DPS, they talked a lot about racism, they talked a lot in great detail about slavery, but how did we miss this part? And I don't know if it was a situation where it hadn't been long enough since the riots for them to really consider it history or relevant, or was it still a touchy topic so they weren't allowed to discuss those things with us? And I didn't understand why I had never heard about it in my personal life. So I still live in the neighborhood where I grew up. I came back and bought it. I moved away for 4 years, and I came back and actually bought the house, and that house has been in our family since 1966. I bought it in 2006. And so I've witnessed great changes since the 80s, and I've heard my mom talk about the changes that have occurred in that house since 1966 and in that neighborhood, but I never knew why. And so at that moment it was just almost like a flood of information was just being processed, and I was so excited but so sad at the same time. And I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. It was like I wanted to tell my kids, but they can't relate. They're kids and they have no concept of anything that I've experienced, So like, who could I have this conversation with? So I called my mom and she was like, oh yeah, I was, a baby at the time, but I remember people talking about it, and but it was like, but it never came up in just general conversation, so.
This is a very segregated region, just period. So when you think of Detroit, you have to really look at Metro Detroit, and it's been a big factor. Some of it is just as strong as places like Boston and Chicago, and some of the places people look at and say, okay, that place is really racist, but it's a lot of segregation here, and it's existed, and I would say it's like it's a part of the culture that is Metro Detroit. So many of these things happened so recently. My mother was alive when Martin Luther King was assassinated. So my mother visited the South where she dealt with Jim Crow laws, and that's within one generation. It's 2 generations removed from enslavement from her. So it's been a lot of advancements as far as to provide opportunities and resources for my people or black people or other people, but it's very, very tough just being that, a lot of these things are recent, and most of it is from what people fear because they don't understand it, because culturally they've never seen it, they've never existed in it, they've never lived in it.
Until we deal with this race issue face to face, it's a fear that needs to be dealt with. Black people, we're willing to get along with white people, but I think because of the sins that happen, the horrible things that happen, I don't know if they're conscious, if they're just scared to deal with it, but they need to deal with it, because the only way we're going to end it is face to face, because we all have red blood, we all have blood, and we work together and live in harmony.
Even though we do go through elections and governmental issues and we don't get exactly what we want, or we don't have the type of representation that we want to have, we still, if we choose to continue to live in this country, then we're gonna have to learn how to deal with each other. Because the riot, I honestly see no point in it, because it really didn't do anything but tear Detroit down. One thing I think I could do to help my neighborhood is to use my voice, because I like to talk, and my mother put a good head on my shoulders. So I think I can spread my knowledge with other people.
Traveling to Detroit, have fun. Volunteering for kids in Detroit, I'll see you in heaven. But we caused these stereotypes. The riots in 1967 in Detroit were our fault. This is why we hold that hood, ratchet, ghetto, gangster title. Like those soldiers thrilled with a victory from defending our country were treated terribly by police, and now they want to shoot, kill, stab, and whip people like me. See, I don't think they understand, because they thought there were maybe 8 to 12 people celebrating, but there were actually 82 contemplating on whether or not to jack up those policemen. But we reacted in anger, like baking soda and vinegar, exploding like bombs and destroying innocent businesses, but we didn't have to. These riots carried on for 5 days. I'm talking 120 hours. My mama as a little kid saw tanks and officers trying without an ounce of power. But how does that affect you today? Wasn't that almost 50 years ago?